Hi everyone, welcome to day 2 of our article on the space race. I'm Kat.
I'm Elsie.
And so today we are talking about the conclusion to the space race. How did it end? Who won?
Who won?
Good question. So we are so far, let's see. We started the Cold War in the 1950s.
Yes.
And then the USSR, or the Soviet Union, and the US started...
And the Soviet Union was taking the lead.
That's right, because they put the first satellite into space. And
they put the first man.
Yes, the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. So right now, it's the early 1960s. The US is behind. They are trying so hard to catch up, but they can't seem to do it. So why? What are they going to do? Maybe there's some way they could still win? They could just pull it out at the end. I guess we will find out. So let's get right onto the article and find out this exciting conclusion.
Reading.
The race into space. By the mid-1960s, the space race was still being led by the Soviet Union. However, this changed when the US made a plan to land people on the moon before 1970. Sadly, the project got off to a tragic start. In 1967, an accident during a launch practice for the Apollo 1 spacecraft resulted in the deaths of 3 astronauts. In spite of the disaster, the US continued with its plan. On July 20th, 1969, the space race saw its most significant moment. 3 US astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, successfully landed the Apollo 11 spacecraft on the moon. After the successful moon landing, the US declared that it had won the space race. From that point on, neither the US nor the Soviet Union maintained as much interest in space missions. Gradually, the 2 countries began to work together. In 1975, astronauts from both countries met each other in space and shook hands. This was a sign that the Cold War was coming to an end. American and Russian astronauts now often work alongside each other on board the International Space Station.
All right, so starting out today, the article says by the mid-1960s, the space race was still being led by the Soviet Union. Okay, so the US hasn't caught up yet.
所以到了1960年代的中期呢，太空竞赛还是由苏联领先。那我们这边看到了一个过去进行被动 ，was still being led， 强调过去的某个时间点，某事正被进行着。到了那个时候，苏联还是领先的。
So what are they going to do? Well, it says, however, this changed when the US made a plan to land people on the moon before 1970.
Okay.
That's ambitious.
The US finally caught up.
Well, they're trying to. I think it was Kennedy, when he became president, he said, we're going to do Project Moonshot, which means we're going to put a man on the moon.
所以呢，这边说到啊，这个状况在1970年前改变了。当时呢，美国有一项人类登入月球的计划。
But all is not well. The article says, sadly, the project got off to a tragic start.
Oops.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Sadly. So get off to a something start, usually a good or bad start, means to begin in a certain way. So getting off to a tragic start means that from the beginning, there was something tragic that happened. Something very bad happened. So tragic here is an adjective that means something that is both a disaster and also very sad. Like people dying in a car crash or the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City. Things like that. Usually tragic things feel not fair because they happen to people who didn't deserve it. These kinds of events are called tragedies. They come from old Greek plays where something bad would happen to the hero and their life would be ruined. It makes you feel upset for them and it makes you just feel bad generally. So an example sentence might be, the tragic plane crash killed all 50 people who were on the flight, leaving their families in grief.
Get off to a 后面加上形容词，再加上 start， 代表的是有一个如何如何的开始。Tragic 是这边放上去的形容词，叫做不幸的、悲剧性的。那除了放 tragic 之外，我们可以放 good 或是 bad 这两个形容词。像是我们可以说 Their marriage got off to a bad start. The wife found out that her husband had been hiding a big secret from her. 老婆发现老公藏着一个天大的秘密，让他们的婚姻有个不好的开始。那课文说到的是呢，难过的是 sadly 这个计划有了悲剧的开始。What happened?
Well, you can imagine that because it's called tragic that people died. So in 1967, an accident during a launch practice for the Apollo 1 spacecraft resulted in the deaths of 3 astronauts. It was very sad. Apparently, they had an electrical fire, and the door wouldn't open, and they all...
They couldn't get out.
Yeah, they couldn't get out, and they all burned to death. It was very, very sad. So this sentence has a couple of words that we want to know. Spacecraft. A spacecraft is a vehicle that goes to space, like a rocket, a satellite, a moon lander, or the Mars lander. So an astronaut is, of course, a person whose job it is to go into space and study it or work on different spacecraft. So an astronaut is a spaceman, space person.
Spacecraft 代表就是太空船，那 astronaut 就是太空人啦。1967年的时候呢，在一次阿波罗1号的太空船的发射演练当中，导致了3位太空人丧生。那我们这边看到的片语 result in 还记得吗？它是导致、造成的意思。
So, I mean, it was very, very sad. It was a big, big setback, which means that the plans had to stop and they had to figure out what was wrong so it would never happen again. So it says, in spite of the disaster, the U.S. continued with its plan. Of course, because they need to win. In spite of or despite means even though something happened. So even though this happened, they had to keep going. They couldn't just stop or it would be a waste of all that they had tried so far. So now we're going to learn what a disaster is. A disaster is a noun that means something terrible or tragic that happens, or something that destroys something and causes a lot of trouble. A disaster can involve death, like the one that we've mentioned, or it can be something less serious. Like if you say somebody's presentation was a disaster, it means they did a very bad job on it. Or if a company has a financial disaster, it means they lose a lot of money. In other words, you could call it a catastrophe, a calamity, a mishap, or an accident. Those are all different words for disaster. An example sentence might be, the wedding was a disaster. The bride told the groom she didn't love him and left him in the church.
我们看回来到 in spite of 这个片语啊，它代表的是尽管，那它是一个介系词片语，后面加名词或 ing. For example, in spite of the rain, he still went hiking by himself. 尽管下雨，他还是自己去爬山。那 in spite of 可以用介系词 despite 代换，刚刚 Kat 有说到。那课文说到的是呢，尽管发生这次的灾难，美国还是继续他的计划。They continued.
So they had to keep going, or else all that research, all that money, all that time would be wasted. And they probably wanted to do it to honor their fallen comrades.
Right.
Anyway, so it says, on July 20th, 1969, the space race saw its most significant moment. So significant here is an adjective that means very important, very big, and memorable, or worth remembering. Something significant is something that people know is a big deal, and it's usually the most important thing. I think we can all guess what the most important moment of the space race is, and the most significant thing to happen last year is probably the COVID pandemic. That was pretty significant. Doesn't mean it was good, but it was important. So, an example sentence, this award is a significant win for the actor as it's the first Oscar he's ever won.
Significant 这个形容词呢，它代表重要的，不过呢，用起来会比 important 强烈，所以我们说它的解释是 very important。那课文这边说啊，在1969年7月20日的这一天呢，太空竞赛见证了它最有意义的时刻。
So what it says is 3 U.S. astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, successfully landed the Apollo 11 spacecraft on the moon.
Woohoo! Finally!
Yeah, and they took their steps. They went on the moon, they planted a flag, they were like, this is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, something like that.
3位美国的太空人呢，成功让阿波罗11号登陆月球。那我们这边看到一个副词 successfully， 它修饰前面 landed 登月的动作。
So what it says is, after the successful moon landing, the US declared that it had won the space race. That's... I mean, I guess, okay, sure. Yeah, we got to the moon. That's the end. Sure, whatever. Anyway, so to declare something means to state something in a way that you want people to know it's important, and you are stating it as a fact. Nobody can argue with you.
那这边呢，我们看到 successful， 它是形容词成功的。刚才我们看到是副词 successfully， 还有一个动词呢，叫做宣告 declare。所以在这次的登陆月球之后呢，美国就宣告他们在这场太空竞赛中获胜。We won, and it's the end.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, from that point on, neither the US nor the Soviet Union maintained as much interest in space missions. So from that point on means after that. So I guess the Soviet Union must have agreed. Okay, yeah, you won. Let's, move on to other things. So maintain is one of the words we need to know here. Let's check it out. To maintain something means to keep something up, or keep it in working order, or keep going on it the same way you did before. If you maintain an interest in something, it means you keep your interest in it strong, the same as you did in the beginning. Maintaining something, maintaining an object, means to keep it in good condition or keep it going regularly. So, for example, it's important to maintain your health during the winter months, since the cold can make your body weaker to disease.
Maintain 这个动词呢是维持，那我们看回去，刚刚有一个片语叫做 from this point on， 或者是 from that point on， 代表是从此之后，或者是从那之后。那我们可以换一些字进去，像是 from that day on， 从那一天开始 ，from then on， 从那个时候开始，或是 from now on， 从现在开始。那从那之后呢，美国和苏联对太空的任务都不再维持像以前一样的兴趣。我们还看到了 neither A nor B， 代表两者皆非，所以美国跟苏联都没有兴趣了。那两者皆是，我们会说 both A and B。
In this sentence, we also saw the word mission. When we talk about a mission, this is a specific task or a set of tasks, kind of like a project that a person or a group is charged with. In other words, that they are asked to do. Usually we'll talk about missions in terms of the government, the army, the military, things like that. So if somebody gives you a mission, it's usually something very, very important and something that is very critical for you to do. So the space race was the mission of the US government and the Soviet government. That was the thing that they were trying very hard to compete with each other for, and that's why it was their mission. So here's an example sentence for the word. Colt is in the military, so he often needs to carry out dangerous missions. So they decided to move on to other things, and gradually the two countries began to work together. Yay, that's a good thing. So gradually is an adverb here that means little by little, kind of a little at a time, growing more and more over time. If something happens gradually, it doesn't happen all at once, but over a longer period of time until it's finished. If you gradually become friends with somebody, you might take several months to know each other well enough. So the opposite that would be immediately or instantly. So here's an example sentence for gradually. Though Harry and Sally hated each other at first, they gradually became good friends over time.
Gradually 这个副词呢代表的是逐渐地，那逐渐的这两个国家就开始合作，他们不再竞争了。Or they are competing against each other secretly.
I think at first it might have been that, but then they kind of decided to stop that. So in 1975, astronauts from both countries met each other in space and shook hands.
在1975年的时候呢，两国的太空人见到了彼此并握手言和。
So they were in space, they shook hands, probably with their gloves on, and this was a sign that the Cold War was coming to an end. Yay, that's a good thing. So to come to an end means to get close to finishing and eventually to be done. It's a gradual way to end something, to come to an end.
Come to an end 代表的是结束。For example, I'm sad that the 3-day trip is about to come to an end.
So this article is about to come to an end, but we have a little more to say about it. So American and Russian astronauts now often work alongside each other on board the International Space Station, the ISS. Yeah, so alongside here means with or next to, but it also kind of means without distance or without problems between people, like your partners. You might be doing different jobs, you might be helping on the same job, but you are working together without many problems. So if you were talking about being on board the space station, that means you are on a vehicle, like on a plane, a train, a ship, or the International Space Station.
Alongside 这个副词呢，代表与一起，在旁边。They work alongside each other， 代表 they work next to each other。他们在彼此的身边工作。所以课本这边说呢，美国和俄罗斯的太空人现在时常一起在国际太空站上工作。那再来呢，我们还看到 on board 这个片语，它代表的是在船上、在飞机上，或者是呢在火车上。那这边我们说到的是在太空站上面。给同学们一个例句哦。A murder happened on the train, so everyone on board had to be investigated. 火车上发生谋杀案，所以呢，在火车上的每个人都要接受调查。
So now the US and Russia still have their own space programs. They're still doing things like that, and other countries have them too. So the space race continues, but it's not really a race anymore. It's just more like a space exploration.
Yeah, and they actually work together.
Exactly. Yeah. So astronauts from different countries work together and help each other out with things. So that's the end of our article on the space race. We hope you've learned a lot. And now it's time for us to go to our For You chat.
For You chat.
All right, our For You chat question today. People disagree about who won the space race. In your opinion, who won the space race and why?
I would say maybe the Soviet Union won the race.
Why?
Or human beings won the race.
Oh, humanity. The real race was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah. No matter which country won the race, it was the first time that we put a man on the moon in the space, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think, you know, even if the motivations behind it were kind of like, well, it's where they're fighting, but at least, you know, we got a lot of great developments out of it. Yeah. We got a lot of really legendary moments. Yeah.
And advanced technology.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we put probably hundreds of satellites into space every year and, you know, put astronauts into space all the time. There's astronauts in space working right now. So that's, you know, I think, yeah, you're right. Humanity won the race. I think if I had to say which of the two countries won,
which one would you choose?
I think I'd choose the Soviet Union too. Because, you know, putting a man on the moon is great, but they were the first.
Yeah, they were the first, actually.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our opinion. Maybe you have a different one. And maybe you're thinking, well, is the space race still going? Kind of. So who might win in the future? So that's all we have for today. We hope you've enjoyed this article and learned something new. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review. Tragic. Everyone felt sad after seeing the tragic plane crash in which 32 people died. Disaster. The recent storm was considered a disaster as it had destroyed thousands of people's homes. Significant. Luckily for Ken, his mistake on the project was not significant, and so his boss wasn't upset. Maintain. Barry and Wayne have managed to maintain their friendship for many years, even though they live far apart. Mission. Mary is upset because her husband, who is an army officer, is going to be sent on a dangerous mission. Gradually. Frank's old car gradually fell apart, so he bought a new one.
智慧小补帖
Spacecraft. Astronaut. Declare. Alongside.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net